Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to be looking at something pretty tough, the school shooting at Abundant Life Christian School
Yeah.
in Madison, Wisconsin. And we have a lot to cover.
Right.
We have a stack of news articles, a bunch of Reddit discussions.
Yep.
So I guess our goal today is to kind of pull out the key facts,
Yeah.
see if these news outlets agree, especially in those early reports,
Right.
and then, look at some of those more opinionated, emotional takes from Reddit.
Exactly.
I gotta say, some of this stuff is really intense.
Yeah. No, it's a lot to unpack.
We're seeing comparisons to the CEO shooting, students talking about faking their own deaths.
There's a lot to process.
Oh, and that one about the 7-year-old solution to school shootings, that one really chills me to the bone.
Yeah, that one was really striking.
Before we get into all that, all the emotional stuff,
Sure.
let's just lay out the basic timeline. What actually happened here?
The facts.
Yeah.
What are the facts?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. A lot of this information, especially early on, was really in flux.
Right.
It was changing really quickly.
Yeah.
So I think it's always super important to just ground ourselves in what we actually know.
Right.
Not the speculation, but, what's actually confirmed.
Right.
So to start, the shooting took place just before 11 a.m.
Okay.
on December 16th at Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay.
3 people died, including the shooter, and that's confirmed.
Right.
And the shooter was a female student at the school.
Okay.
And 6 others were injured.
6 injured.
Some critically.
Yeah.
And that really struck me as we were looking through these reports, how varied the severity of those injuries were.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes to show how random and chaotic these situations really are.
Right. And 6 injured, I mean.
Yeah,
We look at that number and it's easy to kind of gloss over it.
absolutely.
But those are 6 individual stories.
Yeah. Of pain and recovery.
Absolutely.
Of families and loved ones being completely upended.
Entire communities
Yeah.
being impacted.
So another thing that I noticed in these early reports was just the confusion over what the weapon even was.
Yeah.
The police haven't officially confirmed it yet.
Right.
But there's a Reddit thread where someone's claiming they got information from a teacher at the school
Yeah.
that it was a pellet gun.
Interesting.
And with that many casualties,
Right.
that seems pretty hard to believe.
Yeah. I mean, it is surprising, but unfortunately, it's not unheard of.
Okay.
I mean, pellet guns, especially higher-powered ones, can cause some serious damage,
Okay.
particularly at close range.
So, I guess this just highlights that any weapon
Right?
in the wrong hands can have devastating consequences.
Absolutely.
So, this makes me think about how schools are dealing with security these days.
Right.
They're focused on preventing, firearms
Guns, yeah.
from entering.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe they need to be thinking more broadly about all sorts of threats.
About a wider range of threats, for sure.
Before we get into the reactions and all that,
Sure.
can you tell us a little bit more about Abundant Life Christian School?
Yeah.
Just the name alone feels especially poignant after all this.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a K-12 school with about 390 students.
Okay.
And it's affiliated with City Church Madison,
Mm-hmm.
which is a non-denominational Christian church.
Okay.
And I was reading their mission statement, and what really struck me was the emphasis on turning students into disciples of God.
Okay.
There's this focus on spiritual development alongside academics,
Mm-hmm.
this idea of cultivating abundant life.
And then you have this act of violence that just shatters that ideal.
Right. It's difficult to reconcile those two.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Parents are sending their kids to this place
Right.
where they believe those values will be instilled.
Exactly. And then this unimaginable tragedy occurs.
It really raises questions about how a community built on faith
Mm-hmm.
copes with an event like this.
Yeah.
With their beliefs.
Yeah.
That's a conversation that we see reflected in some of the social media posts as well.
Right.
That we'll be getting into.
Okay, so we've talked about the facts, the school itself.
Yep.
Let's dive into the human side of things.
Let's do it.
What kind of reactions are we seeing from parents and officials in these early reports?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of shock and grief, of course.
Right.
And the articles really capture that initial chaos as parents rush to reunite with their kids.
Yeah.
One mother, Victoria Gonzalez, her 12-year-old son, he was unharmed physically,
Okay.
but she describes him as severely traumatized by this.
Oh, wow.
He was apparently near the shooter.
Oh, gosh.
So I mean, that emotional impact, that's going to last
Yeah.
for a long time.
And then another parent, Bethany Hyman, she actually found comfort in being able to video call her daughter
Oh, wow.
while the school was still on lockdown.
That's interesting.
It just highlights how technology, I mean, we often blame it for disconnecting us, but in moments like this,
Right.
it can provide that lifeline.
Yeah.
It allowed her to offer some reassurance,
Right.
some comfort to her daughter, even when they were physically separated.
It's amazing. It's amazing how those little details stick with you, you know?
Yeah.
This just frantic search for connection. The
It's-
relief of that video call.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that behind all these headlines,
Right.
all these statistics,
Absolutely.
there are real people who are going through something unimaginable.
Real people dealing with unthinkable pain.
Yeah.
We also see officials like Governor Tony Evers
Mm-hmm.
and the state superintendent, Jill Underlie,
Right.
offering condolences and, as you might expect, calling for action
Of course. Yeah.
to prevent future tragedies.
Yeah.
And then the school put up a brief post on their Facebook page,
Oh, right.
just requesting prayers for the community.
Right.
It's a very immediate, raw response.
Yeah.
A plea for unity
Right. And healing.
and healing in the face of this suffering.
In the face of this immense suffering. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, that image of the school turning to prayer after an event like this,
Mm-hmm.
it brings us back to that tension we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
This school that's dedicated to fostering abundant life
Right.
is now confronting this senseless loss.
This stark contrast.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to the struggles many are facing as they try to, understand this tragedy.
Exactly. Try to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's just one layer of this conversation.
Right.
Things get even more complex when we look at how this is being processed on social media,
For sure.
particularly in those Reddit threads that you've pulled. Absolutely.
You see the raw emotions, the anger, the debates, and frankly, some pretty disturbing comments that are hard to ignore.
Right.
We'll unpack all of that after a quick break.
Yeah, let's take a break,
Okay.
and we'll come back to that.
It's good.
All right. Yeah, it's a whole different world on Reddit.
Yeah.
The 8 News thread about this shooting,
Mm-hmm.
it's just this outpouring of reactions, everything from like raw grief and fear
Yeah.
to honestly this kind of like numb resignation. Here we go again.
Right.
You see that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course you get the heated debates about gun control.
Right.
The Second Amendment.
Of course.
It's like a microcosm of the national conversation
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
that we always seem to have after these tragedies.
Right.
But for me, it wasn't even the political stuff that stood out as much.
Yeah.
It was some of the comments from kids.
Yeah. You mentioned that earlier. The
Yeah.
7-year-old.
Yeah, the 7-year-old who had this really chilling solution to school shootings.
Right.
It really it got to me.
Yeah.
This little kid, trying to understand why going to school could mean getting shot.
Yeah.
And his answer is to just send American kids to other countries.
Yeah.
Like he's internalized this fear.
Yeah.
This sense that America is just inherently dangerous for children.
That's what's so disturbing about that, right?
Yeah.
Like that speaks volumes about the world they're growing up in.
It really does.
And it makes you wonder,
Yeah,
what long-term impact this is having,
Yeah.
this constant threat of violence,
absolutely.
like their sense of safety, their outlook on life.
Absolutely.
There's another comment, too,
Yeah.
a student who said they collect ketchup packets
Oh, wow.
so they can fake their own death.
Oh, my gosh.
If there's a shooting,
I mean,
how do you even process that
I know.
as an adult?
It's heartbreaking on the one hand,
Yeah.
but it also shows this level of preparedness,
Right.
a coping mechanism
Yeah.
that no child should ever need.
Right.
I mean, they're growing up with active shooter drills,
Right.
news reports of these mass shootings,
Mhm.
and it's seeping into their everyday lives.
Right.
It's like they're being conditioned to expect the worst.
Yeah.
And then there was that teacher who shared a story about a first grader
Oh, yeah.
during a lockdown drill.
Mhm.
The kid just matter-of-factly
Right.
explains why they're doing the drill.
Right.
Because someone might come to school with a gun.
Just like that. No big deal.
It's chilling
Yeah.
how normalized this has become
Yeah.
for some of these kids.
Right.
Lockdown drills, It's just another part of their routine,
Yeah.
along with fire drills and earthquake drills.
Yeah.
I think that's what really gets to me, that casual acceptance,
Right.
that lack of surprise.
Yeah. It's really disturbing.
It's a stark reminder
Yeah.
of how deep this fear has penetrated
Yeah.
their world.
Yeah, their whole world.
And it makes you wonder, at what point does that constant state of anxiety
Right.
become too much?
Yeah. At what point does it become
You know?
unbearable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's not just the kids' reactions
Right.
that are so telling.
Right.
We also see a lot of debate around the Second Amendment
Of course,
in these threads.
Yeah.
Commenters are like dissecting the meaning of well-regulated militia.
Right.
Like they're constitutional scholars. It
Yeah.
seems like every time this happens,
Yeah.
every time there's a school shooting, that debate just reignites.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's a fundamental tension in
Yeah.
American society.
Yeah.
And these tragedies just bring it to the forefront.
Right.
You have one side arguing for stricter gun control,
Yeah.
emphasizing the need to protect innocent lives.
Right.
Especially in schools.
Yeah.
And then, you have the other side,
Right.
fiercely defending their right to bear arms,
Mm.
often citing the, historical context of the Second Amendment
Right. Yeah.
and arguing against any perceived infringement
Mhm.
on those rights.
It's a complex issue.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get lost in the back and forth.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
that behind those arguments
Right.
are deeply held beliefs
Right.
and values.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got to address the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
or maybe the missing elephant.
Yeah.
You flagged a bunch of comments comparing this school shooting to the recent CEO shooting.
Right.
And there's a lot of,
Yeah.
I don't know, dark humor.
Dark humor.
Yes, cynicism.
Yeah.
Almost like a sense of resentment
Yeah.
that this tragedy isn't getting the same level of attention. That's right, yeah. It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
I mean, the CEO shooting, it dominated the news cycle.
Yeah.
4 days.
Yeah.
Scarked manhunts.
Yeah.
Political grandstanding.
Oh, yeah.
The whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
This school shooting, it's horrific.
Of course. Yeah.
But it feels almost like a footnote
Right.
by comparison.
Yeah.
And that discrepancy.
Yeah.
I think that's what's fueling those cynical comments on Reddit.
Yeah.
Did they need to take the pressure off the CEOs?
Yeah.
Don't worry, all the CEOs are safe.
It's dark,
It is.
but it reflects this deeper disillusionment.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And it's like people are picking up on this hierarchy of grief.
Yeah.
This feeling that some lives are just deemed more valuable,
Exactly.
more worthy of outrage
Yes.
and action.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're expressing this through dark humor,
It's just another layer of complexity
it really is.
to this whole thing.
It really does.
It forces us to ask some pretty uncomfortable questions
Yeah.
about our priorities as a society.
Right. Yeah.
Whose lives are we truly valuing?
Yeah.
It
It makes you think.
whose deaths spark national mourning
Yeah.
and whose deaths are just met with a shrug
Yeah.
and a thoughts and prayers.
I've thoughts and prayers. It's disturbing.
It is disturbing. It's
Yeah.
a disturbing reflection on our culture.
I agree.
And it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
if that perceived lack of value,
Right.
that feeling of being overlooked,
Mhm.
contributes to the resignation and helplessness
Yeah.
you see in some of those comments.
Yeah.
It's like they've given up hope that anything will change.
Yeah, that's the scary part.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
Right.
The immediate aftermath,
Right.
the school's background, these raw reactions
Mm.
from social media.
Yeah.
This unsettling comparison to the CEO shooting.
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff.
It is heavy.
Before we wrap up, I just want to make sure we kind of pull out the key insights here.
Yeah.
What should our listeners be taking away from all of this?
Yeah, so I think, first and foremost, you've got a really clear picture now of what happened at Abundant Life Christian School.
Yeah.
We've laid out the timeline, the facts that we know, the tragic loss of life, the injuries. We've also looked at how parents are reacting, how officials are responding.
Right.
And even that brief but poignant message from the school.
Right.
But we've also kind of gone deeper, haven't we?
We have, yeah. For me, what's really stayed with me are those social media threads.
Yeah.
Just those raw voices,
Yeah.
Those kids talking about ketchup packets and foreign exchange programs. It's haunting.
It really is.
Yeah, and then you have the adults. Some are calling for action. Some are falling back on those Second Amendment arguments.
Right.
And some are just, expressing this feeling of, here we go again.
That exhaustion.
Yeah, it's like society doesn't even know how to process this anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then you bring in that comparison to the CEO shooting.
Right.
It's like a mirror to our own anxieties.
It is, yeah.
The dark humor, the cynicism, it all points to this unspoken hierarchy of grief.
Yeah.
Like some tragedies, they grip the nation, they lead to immediate action.
Yeah.
But others, even when innocent lives are lost, they're met with this muted response.
A much more subdued response.
Yeah.
It's really telling.
And it's almost as if we've become desensitized to school shootings, like they're just another grim statistic.
Right. Another number.
Yeah, another number in the news cycle, and that's terrifying.
It is a terrifying thought.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that people are talking about it, even in these like cynical ways,
Right.
with dark humor,
Mm-hmm.
I think it suggests that there's still some outrage there.
Right.
There's still a desire for change.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we actually move forward?
Right.
How do we move beyond just thoughts and prayers?
Yeah.
How do we actually address this recurring nightmare?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
You hear it after every shooting.
Right.
This call for action.
Yeah.
But then it feels like we get stuck in this cycle
Right.
of shock, grief, debate, and then nothing.
And then silence.
Yeah, silence.
And we just move on to the next one.
Until the next one, and then it happens all over again.
It's a cycle that needs to be broken.
Well, how do we break it?
Well, I think, it starts with recognizing that there's not going to be one simple answer here.
Right?
There's no magic solution.
Yeah.
It's going to require a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
It's going to involve lawmakers, educators,
Yeah.
mental health professionals, parents, even students.
Right.
Everyone has a role to play.
But where do we even begin? I mean, I look at the political landscape.
Yeah.
It's so divided. The gun control debate feels like it's never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And then you have these deeper, like, societal issues that we've touched on, the media's role, our values, how we even respond to these events. It feels overwhelming.
It's true. It's a very complex problem. But, I do think this deep dive, it's given us some valuable insights.
Okay.
We've really seen the human cost of inaction.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard those voices
Right.
directly impacted by this.
Yeah.
And I think we've confronted some uncomfortable truths about our society.
Okay.
So now what?
Right. What now? What can our listener do?
Yeah.
Someone who's taken the time to really understand this issue, like, how can they make a difference?
Well, I think, first it's about staying informed, staying engaged.
Right.
Don't let this fade away.
Yeah.
Don't let this become another forgotten headline.
Right.
Keep asking those questions.
Yeah.
Keep challenging assumptions
Yeah.
and demand more from our leaders.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not just about national policy either.
Right.
There
Yeah.
are things we can do in our own communities, in our schools,
Yeah.
to foster a culture of safety and support.
Yeah.
Get involved with local organizations. Advocate for mental health resources in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Start conversations with friends and family about responsible gun ownership.
Right.
Every little bit helps.
So I guess as we wrap up this deep dive, the message is, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's easy to give in to that feeling of hopelessness.
Yeah.
But this issue is just too important to ignore.
Absolutely.
And we all have a responsibility to do something.
Yeah.
Even if it's small.
Even if it's a small act.
Yeah, to try and, create a better and a safer future.
Yes.
For ourselves and for the next generation.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us on the deep dive.